Welcome to the Symposium podcast of the Cheops Lustrum. I am Frederik Prins from the Symposium Committee and this is Rewired. We are very happy to present to you today the first podcast of the Lustrum Symposium week. Due to COVID, everybody will be a bit sad to be celebrating the holidays with less friends and family than usual. That is why we are starting off the Symposium week on this day to cheer you up as a gift on the birthday of Sinterklaas. In consultation with the Sint, of course. Today our guest will be Philippe Samyn from Samyn & Partners. We will be talking about the first zero carbon base on Antarctica. At the end of the interview, there was some time for some other members of the committee to ask some interesting questions.
First of all, welcome, and we're very glad that you could join us for our podcast today. So what I thought we could do today is first talk about your design processes and then talk about the project we're going to talk about, going into it in detail. So today we're talking about the Princess Elizabeth base that you worked on. It's a base in Antarctica, so that's very interesting. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and what you're specialized in?
Okay, so I'm specialized in questioning why are we doing things. Right? And the first thing we have to remember, modestly as architects and engineers, is that we dramatically lack of imagination, that we should fight against our fear of unknown. Unknown is the most beautiful thing you can imagine because you don't know it yet. So my quest is permanently asking myself, why are we doing something? And it's a determined process. It's a why, but with a goal. You know, it's we first have to think in which direction we want to go, and then put all the questions around it. So the design process here is as transversal as possible. And I'm writing, and I'm 72, so I run Samyn Partners for 40 years. And when we created the company, June 20, 1980. After 5 years already working without a company structure, I decided that I would run the company for 40 years as the concierge, the manager, plus designing everything. And after 40 years, that I would leave the management to other partners and I would only continue focusing only on the design. So I'm now, since June 2020, a happy man because I'm only busy with design and calculation. So I have more time to talk with students, with colleagues, and to write the fundamentals. So I didn't wait 2 months ago to start with that, and already 3 years ago, as a member of the Royal Academy of Belgium, I'm writing a book to be published at the class of science as soon as possible, with name Who We Know, What, How to Build Now, subtitle Why. It will be written in French because it's my mother language, mind you, and we'll make afterwards a translation. And this is also due to the fact that my peer review is basically French or Dutch-speaking people, and also because if you want to write seriously technical or scientific issues, you better do it in the language you master properly. And after that, we'll make a translation in English as usual. So why do I speak about that? Because we are since World War II, science and technology very curiously, and has to do with the drama of this war, has been used urgently, not really thinking what we were doing. So most of the construction post-war, post 1945, are crude, as simple, because we had no choice. No? Now, with the wealth going on, we might think a little more about the quality of the buildings, especially in relation with the environment. When I was a child living along the River Lye in Ghent, I was playing with insects, birds, flowers, and there's something which has been forgotten. I'm so grateful to my parents who had that chance to be with nature while called by dad in mathematics, physics, and to draw and to look at the flowers and the birds. I think we should all have this opportunity. I mean, that the building is the first partner of a building is nature, and it is so amazing. And because of the growing importance of cities, it is as if this connection was granted, that a city should not play with nature, which of course is very weird. But we have been used not to question that issue. Now we see, and this COVID-19 story is a drama, of course, but it's also a magnificent opportunity to look at what do we want for our child, what do we want for us. Just, we want to be happy, and reflect, to speak something, an office building in a reflecting glass glued with silicone and with air conditioning is obviously not the answer, although it's still being built. And that is really why do we build such unpleasant buildings, such harmful buildings. But it's easy to say to critic, but when you meet the critic, say, how do you do it? How are you able then to try to make it better if you have this arrogancy? And of course, modesty is the first thing you need to have, because it is not so easy to make a building without a silicone joint. Well, mind you, we have banned silicone since years, and most of our buildings now are built without silicone. And to do that, well, you need to have battens. To make a flat facade without silicone is impossible. So, thanks God, the facade gets again a thickness, like Gothic churches or Gothic buildings. Probably the Gothic period was the most civilized period in building reflections, much better than the Renaissance, by the way. And the ability of putting things together was mastered at the Gothic period on an unbelievable way. But we're so busy with other stuff. There is one architect I admire. Is he an architect? Is he an engineer? Well, a couple of architects, of course. But I think about Richard Rogers. If you look at the buildings of Rogers, and when he started making Beaubourg, people would say, what is this weird stuff? But 50 years afterwards, Beaubourg is still a very humane building. And if you look, I was lecturing in one of Rogers' buildings in the city of London last year, and next to the Lloyd's. And I was just looking at this Lloyd's building, wow, this so-called high-tech building is extraordinarily humanistic because the scale is there. The details are correctly done. So the more we're designing, the more we start. You know what I was doing yesterday? I was designing the building of applied science of Brussels University now. And of course, if a building of applied science is not exemplary, then you die, of course. And this building should be a manifesto of a trial of good building. And by doing that, we are maniac, designing every concrete block with the joints, and then saying we're going to make it with lime cement so that students can dismantle the building. So we will not use plaster walls, but concrete block walls. And then you think about the door frames. Of course, you will not use a silicone or a plastic joint. You're going to use a foam. So that means that if you want to put a door on the wall with a foam, of course, you don't put the door frame between the bricks, but against the brick, because if you put it between the bricks, you have to push on a very weird way the joint between the wood or the steel and the concrete block. So that means that all the doors will be applied. Crazy, isn't it? But this detail has huge importance on the construction details we're building. And mind you, I underestimate the detail, and that means that our nice Revit BIM model has to be totally reviewed because I was lacking thinking about that detail. So it is a permanent play between the general vision, the goal, the general shape of the building, and the general proportion, the way air, light is coming in, the way nature can invade the building, and then the dirty, silly detail of how do you make a good doorknob. See that, so that's one example. I'm sorry to speak starting from a detail, but it's so exciting in our intellectual activity is that we have to go from the general to the detail and permanence. And every day, every half an hour, you jump from one to the other one. Thinking there's now a big fear about energy, and people get confused about that. Just to make us think, I was calculating for who we know. We try to make zero energy buildings, and to do that, we use an unbelievable amount of gadgets. For example, the fashion of trying to recuperate the energy of the air getting out of a housing, of an apartment, and to put those calories in the air coming in, happens through an engine. Well, if you calculate the embodied energy of that engine and the lifetime of that engine, it's a nonsense, because you will never be able to get back the energy you spent to make that machine. So only a month ago, I was thinking, what is now to make a global figure, the embodied energy in a building? Imagine you make a common building, suppose it costs about 2,000 euros square meter. Then you say, okay, how many joule, kilowatt hour, will this building need to stand? You have two possible approaches. The one is in the way of Michael Ashby. You know the book of Ashby?
No.
I don't know which British university is teaching, but mechanical properties of materials or something like that. Michael Ashby, and he has made a lot of tables, log, with two properties of materials. And he has clouds for every kind of material. It's quite a useful book. And he added, it's I think in 7th or 8th edition now, he added last year a chapter about embodied energy. Very arguable, a lot of counter-argument can be given to the values he's giving, but anyway, is one of the first guy who has put it in simple words in the book, to evaluate, how many joule you need to produce 1 kilogram of steel or brickwork. But then, and you have to know, by the way, that the notion of embodied energy has been invented, discovered by Russian economist in the 1930s, with a very idealistic socialist view on the Lenin period, not the Stalin period. But it's amazing to think that we are now rediscovering something economists were looking at very seriously in 1930. So to define what is the real embodied energy in a building is impossible. Theoretically, but there is a practical way. If you think that the international monetary unit is not the euro, the dollar, the yen, the yuan, or whatever, but it is the joule, because it's all energy. So you can, to evaluate roughly the embodied energy in a construction, you can start on one hand by finding the amount of megajoule, gigajoule per kilogram of cubic meter of material. And then,
well, actually, sorry to interrupt you. Well, actually, we're talking about the energy stuff of your building on Antarctica as well further on. So I thought it is very interesting if we could go back to the first design process of your project in Antarctica, and then we can talk about the energy of your project later on to actually see how it works in your Antarctica project, if that's okay.
I ask you 1 minute of patience to finish my argument.
Yeah, of course, no.
Because it is related. I'm really at the earth of the topic. Exactly, because it goes back to the question how and why. So to make a long story short, then to my papers to justify why. 1 square meter demands about 54 gigajoule per square meter. So this is a huge amount of energy. That is more than 200 years of common energy consumption. So that means that it's quite nice, of course, to reduce the energy consumption of the building, but that is really a detail in the global cost of building. That means that when you build something, you better be sure that it's there for a long period, and the cheaper it is, the less expensive it is, the more virtuous you are. That means that there is a win-win situation making economical buildings at the condition that you design it in such a way that it has a chance to be there for a long period. And the only way to give that chance is to make a friendly building. No aggressive building, no high tech, no pow, just something, and you in Netherlands are very cute in that, and you know that since long, that making a building that be reused for other functions in the time passing is the best guarantee you don't have to destroy it. You know, I'm talking to you from our old farm. Our office is in a farm built in 1830, nearly two centuries ago. We bought a ruin and we didn't destroy anything. We just restored the ruin, and we're here since 30 years. And it was a very low running cost and very low investment cost. See? So this obsession of why are we building, what are we building, and things that should be friendly in harmony with nature. This is to answer your basic question. Consuming minimum amount of energy by making a nice door frame, which I started to discuss with. See, that's the global issue.
Yeah.
Now, to you.
Okay. Yeah. So before we start on also the details of energy and sustainability of your design in Antarctica, let's first talk about your design process of that project. So the project of the Princess Elizabeth Base was commissioned in 2004 by the International Polar Foundation, and it was built in 2007. So had you worked on anything like that, before?
Well, my specialty is exploring. So, you know, I'm always doing building I've never done. And I try to copy nobody and also not copying myself. So every project is a new adventure. The only thing which is constant is this quest for logic, you know, boerenverstand. How do you make things just, you know, reasonable? And sometimes it looks unreasonable. You see, that's what is funny, is that you can arrive to iconical buildings with a logical process. But this way on, not the other way on. Too many buildings now are just based on an idea of a shape, and then engineers try to make it work. So my process is just the opposite. I think, how do I simple thing and say, oh, for example, give you an example, again, based because I'm a specialist in going sideways in discussions. I got a nice engineer teacher at the University of Louvain in Belgium who came to me last weekend to build his house. And he has a magnificent piece of wood with untouched ground. So I told him, well, if you want to respect the nature, we put it on poles, like the Sarawak in Indonesia. Yeah, but he wants a swimming pool to train because he is a big surfer. Well, how do you make a swimming pool then in a piece of land you don't want to destroy? Well, the idea is that you make a greenhouse in plastic with wood poles, and you put a big transparent plastic back on top of it in which you swim, but your plants can grow under your swimming pool. That's weird, isn't it? And what is nice is this will be a very inexpensive swimming pool to build. To give you an example.
Yeah.
Now, to go back to Antarctica, to be clear, the Alain Hubert, who is the explorer behind all that, was busy with his projects in Antarctica, working with consultants that were used to make images and not buildings. in the meantime, also, he worked with my colleagues at the von Karman Institute of Fluid Dynamics, with whom I'm working. My thesis as an engineer 50 years ago was partly done at von Karman. So all my colleagues at von Karman are friends. So I know them well. And the shape of the building was, as a matter of fact, the conclusion of the wind tunnel test at von Karman Institute, which, by the way, is 2 kilometers from here. So I go there with my bike quite often. And for many of our projects, because we do use the skills of those guys quite often. So the shape of the building was the conclusion of those various approach, plus the idea of Alain himself and his wife, Gigi Amin, of how they wanted to live in there with that team. And then some designers gave a shape around that, but there's no idea how to build it. And this process, and then the contractor B6 was already in, and all the contracts were in. And after 2 years of turning around the object, they were nowhere. And excuse me, I don't remember the date, but it was somehow in March of that year that Alain came in panic, say, we are nowhere, and I need to load the ship in November to go to Antarctica with the building in parts. So would you please help me to design that building? And that's how it started. So I got a shape. The shape was about fixed. Alain and the guys from Borkaman had a very good idea to put this building on posts. For an obvious reason that snow would not pack against the facade of the building, which, by the way, seems obvious. But for the moment, it's nearly only one of the very few buildings on posts in the Antarctica. A lot of the buildings are just put on the ground, which creates a lot of miseries, a lot of danger. Some guys have died between a frozen door and between a pack of snow. So for safety reasons, to put the building on posts is obvious. So but the thing that being said, how you do it. And I remember, there's a very short story. He came to see me morning, it was about 10 o'clock, and I had to go to a side meeting for the train station in Leuven. And on the way, taking the highway, I was thinking to the worries of Alain. And I thought I would make it in wood, because I had to design everything in 2 months' time. Because if you, with the timing, so in the first meeting I told Alain, well, we're going to build that building fully in Belgium to be sure there's not a screwdriver missing, and then pack it and send it in the Russian boat to Antarctica. So knowing the date, I think it was November, we say, okay, we build it somewhere in Belgium a month earlier to check if we haven't forgotten anything. And so we need to be, let's say, somewhere in September. And so back, that means that we had to be ready somehow in June with the full concept. And driving to Leuven, I remember I met a couple of years before a carpenter in Luxembourg, who's named Alain Lecoq, first name Pascal Lecoq, pardon, with company Prefalux in Luxembourg. And I remember a cute guy, a good engineer, obsessed by wood detailing. So in the car, I called him. I hadn't seen the guy since a couple of years. Pascal, I have a good news for you and a bad news for you. The good news is that I will charge you to build the Belgian Antarctica base. I said, what do you say? Yes, you're going to build for me the Belgian Antarctica base. The bad news is that you have to be in my office this afternoon at 6 p.m. because we start the design at 6 p.m. this afternoon. And so he was there at 6 p.m. Alain was there. And, we're using computers as everyone, of course, but we also use chalk and blackboards to develop concepts. So we have computers, paper, pencils, chalk and blackboards, and cameras and cameras and whatever. And so how do we build that thing simply? And the same evening, having my craftsman with me, ask him if it was feasible for his machines because the timing was short and at a reasonable price. In the meantime, also, because it was a public market, I asked the office to print 2,000 pages of specifications. And I asked him to sign that because there was a standard barcode specification. Of course, we would find in that the specification we didn't need, but you had a lot of specification not useful. But as I didn't know how the building would look like, I gave him the 2,000 pages they had to sign to be sure that administratively was okay. So that happened also the same day. And just pushed on the button, print, or data bank. And so the idea came very clearly, say we make a two thick envelope in plywood, thick, separated from 40 or 50 centimeter. I don't remember. We're going to put polystyrene foam with graphite in it, the best lambda we could have at the time. And then, and this was an idea of Pascal, how would we hold simply the two wood decks together? And he had experimented the idea of those round wood stocks between, and his machine could do it. So say, okay, you have that, we're going to use your wood stocks. And that was basic structure. And also, we had to think about, and you know, it's all about very basic equation, by the way. Much too often, people are rushing in R&D before DNI. Before research and development, you have to discover and invent. It's hopeless and pointless to make research and development if you haven't. This is not an answer to a discovery or an invention. So there was that day we were busy with DNI. How will we do that stuff on a short timing? So we had at the same time, and we had no time to make finite element analysis or whatever. Of course, we can do. And I use my slide rule and PL squared 8HA and very simple equations, which globally is always applicable, even for a high rise or a suspended bridge. And by doing that, giving the size, the main glue-lam elements. And mind you, the same day, all the dimensions were given. And it's maybe I was wrong at 5% or 10%, but the issue was so important that it didn't matter. And so we had clear. Now we had to support the structure. And then very simply, most basic that you cannot imagine, I did design those trestles in steel. And of course, round tube is the best for the buckling and less expensive. So very quickly, being used to design steel structure, I made a sketch of the steel structure, which was of course not from Pascal Lecoq, but from the guy from B6 and the steel constructor. So that was a site for a next meeting to discuss with the steel guy how we would be able to produce those trestles. And then we had to make foundations. And the first idea we didn't apply. We said, well, let's bore holes and let's use ice as foundation material. Because ice has frozen water has a bearing strength. So we made some tests, but after a couple of days, we had to abandon the idea, which might come back. And Alain, we had some experience, said, well, I'm going to pour concrete for a hole. But for concrete with low temperature is not what you think. So we made, and then, in scientific world, friendship is quite important. So you have colleagues at university, many of those, and a couple of phone calls, what do you think? Can you make a test with ice? Can you make a test with concrete? What is the temperature? So all those, this teamwork, this network was on the way the same days. And having all my colleagues, and I should make a list of all the colleagues who kindly helped me in being sure I was not crazy with the idea, we finally decided that in a couple of days that Alain would bore holes, pour concrete, put some heating system in it so that we are sure the concrete was not freezing. First operation, then trestles, then building the building. Now, the issue was that it has to be totally prefabricated, loaded on a Russian ship the Polar Foundation had already reserved years before, because you don't have a ship going to the South Pole like that. You have to be sure the ship is available. And by the way, you also may have huge storms that might block the access. And it is not a detail, I'll tell you, because we are making a new project on the South Pole for the moment. And we have been blocked by a storm. And a very important sponsor could not go to the site. And it was in January, just before the COVID. So all those things are part of the design process. You have to think about accidents and inconveniences of any kind. So aware of that, we were just saying, how do we make it simple? And we had no right of being uncertain of things. So if you have to be certain, of course, you do take sometimes very conservative decisions because it's fundamental. So the idea came quickly to make those elements, and you've seen pictures of those prefab elements, and try to make them as similar as possible. Now, after that, with the drum of the cladding of this structure, it was.
Oh, can I quickly ask a question about the Anchorage? Because I wasn't quite sure how it worked that you just told. Because it's anchored on granite rock, right?
Yes.
So, and then you drilled into that rock?
Yes.
And then poured
in concrete with the reinforcement and having a steel plate on which the trestles were bolted.
Okay. And then how does it stay heated or because of the ice?
I didn't remember, but Alain, you can interview him about that. He heated with hot water, with a tube of hot water, like a radiator, and to be sure that the concrete would not freeze before hardening. Very simple technique, you know. The builder was Alain himself. He was on site. He was directing the construction, and because of his experience as an explorer, having lived in the South Pole and North Pole for months, having made unbelievable treks through that, he was quite aware of all the dangers, and so his contribution was fundamental. I mean, his knowledge of as explorer was fundamental to be sure it would work. So that was his credit and his part of the game. I was only his technical support, would I say.
Yeah, because you yourself, you weren't able to go to Antarctica.
Pardon?
You yourself didn't go to Antarctica for this project.
Oh, I could have gone, but the cost of the airplane ticket was €5,000.
Yeah.
And I although I always want to see the sites where I'm building, I thought it was unreasonable to spend that money, because my added value of that trip, Alain being there, was zero. So I have never been to Antarctica yet. And for a simple reason, say, why should someone spend so much money to have me as a tourist there? As, of course, I have all the data on my computer. And mind you, during construction, I was live seeing cameras to see if it was okay. So I made a site control from my office here in Brussels with the cellular of Alain. Lovely technology, right? Now, the next design issue, and it was not a detail, was how do we clad this insulated structure from the outside and from the inside? And then looking at where the accidents that occurred in the past on all the existing buildings. And first, condensation and rotting of the buildings or corroding of the buildings. So we had to be sure that we had from the inside a continuous vapor barrier. And when I mean really a continuous vapor barrier, I mean the smallest hole could be a drama. And that means that from the inside on, we have glued on the plywood 2 alu-craft sheets. See what I mean? It's a sheet of aluminium on craft paper, which is nearly an absolute vapor barrier, glued on each other. And then, for the acoustic reason and the comfort inside, a woolen felt attached with scratch, 3M scratch, you know, yeah, using for your backpack, and this for the inside. And still there, and we have done that so that we could remove the felt to check every year it was not a problem in the vapor barrier. Now, that being said, what happens when the pack is resting on the glulam beam? How, well, mind you, on top of the steel beam, on the wood beam, we have put a large steel plate getting out of the beam 5 or 10 centimeter, just to glue the alucraft on it. So the vapor barrier is done by 2 alucraft plus steel plates. And also, where the steel plate was bolted, screwed in the glulam beam, we had to be sure that at that point, we would not have a flow of vapor. See? So, of course, again, then our DNI, R&D has been the detailed calculation of the vapor flow in the complex. Okay? So, from the inside, we had theoretically no vapor, no water, risking to condense in the complex of the envelope. Then outside, well, in major storms, sometimes you have flying rocks, and the flying rocks might destroy with its kinetic energy quite a lot of things. So, just thinking about the middle-aged warriors, I think we're going to make a shield around it. So we will cover that building with steel plates. And if you see, there is no one other Antarctica building with steel plates on it, which is also for me quite weird, because it's the most simple solution and an expensive solution and low-tech solution to get the shock of a flying stone on the thing. And that's the idea. Now, between the idea again and now we do it, it's not so obvious, because doing that, you have to be sure that this steel plate is not blocking the vapor flow. So, and this steel sheet is not waterproofing. So we had to first, on the plywood, put it EPDM, I think, waterproofing membrane enveloping the wool stuff, with a felt underneath it, to be sure that if by any chance we would have some vapor in it, it would fly away. Then on top the felt, EPDM, another felt, and then the bolted steel plates, with of course the danger of having water infiltration where the steel plates are screwed in the EPDM membrane. And we have had some problems with that because it's impossible. If you want to make some mechanical fixing, you can invent whatever you want. You have weak points. But I don't know how many years ago is that thing done, 14 or 15 years, it's still there and without troubles. So I think I made my job and I'm happy it's working. And then you had the glazing units, which had to be limited, and then all the energy storing. But basically, the story of that, I resumed the thing. And then it was really, and I'm very thankful to Pascal Lecoq and his team. I think 2 months after the first sketches and the drawings, and then of course, there was a lot of, the army was busy with producing the drawings. We went to Luxembourg to see the mock-up, the first element. Alain was in the South Pole, I think, that day, so his wife Gigi was there with us, and we checked with Pascal and his crew, and my crew, all the latest detail. It was all very useful, but they worked perfectly, so there were very little remarks, and we were able to produce the wool stuff. And then we built the wool stuff, including the steel trestle, into a taxi in Brussels to check, and it was very. Of course, there were some details we had neglected, but imagine all the wood box to be put on the ships were there. So when the building was built and dismantled, all the boxes were numbered, and the trucks had just to bring it to the Russian ship and to go on site. That's a simple story. I played the contractor.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but you talked about all this protection. It's very interesting that you said that actually, because I was wondering that it's you said that it's so obvious that you use these materials, but the Princess Elizabeth base is actually placed more land inwards, which is not that usual for Antarctica bases, because near the sea, I believe the climate is more favorable, I guess. Is it really that, do you know if it's that much difference if you place it inward, or do you need like such protection as you just described everywhere on the continent?
That's another issue. Not really. It is, you know, and allow me, I have no comments to say on that, that is the negotiation for getting his place on the South Pole is quite a diplomatic adventure. And I, of course, also got the credit to have been able to carry all those negotiations with all the international institutions who are caring for the South Pole. So it is the place where you can build is the result of a lot of negotiation between countries. And the only thing, and I was quite right, is he wanted a granite rock to put the station, because to put a station on ice is always troublesome. You cannot imagine to have something without trouble on an ice support. I mean, it's like a boat. I see. No, that's not a boat. It's a planter in your back. But so you see, and I go back to Palladio, in the 4 book of architecture, Palladio, which by accident, on the recommendation of a friend, I read. You know, the book of Palladio, written in 1560, was translated by a French monk in 1640. And so you have a French version, which is perfectly readable, of the idea of Palladio. And it's amazing to see, although he was less subtle than the Gothics, obsessed by the Roman style, Renaissance, back to Romans, but yet his obsession about buildings, you know, the way you should build properly. And it starts with the choice of the piece of land. It's really back to basics. You putting a building, it's always negotiating with earth or rock and water flows. And so the choice of the rock is fundamental. Now, the new project we're studying in the Antarctica is, of course, also on the rock. And it's also the credit of Alain to have been able to agree, to negotiate, to receive a site, to be allowed to build on rock. But that's fundamental, and it's really part of the success of the story. And pardon, you also have huge katabatic winds, so you have storms. But you know, being 300 kilograms a square meter, 100 kilograms a square meter, doesn't make the difference. It's just, you know, what is important is that the geometry, to make something withstanding, you have the material, of course, but the geometry is fundamental. So think about a reasonable geometry, you know, having lever arms which are large enough, elements which in normal condition works at very low stress, but are able to cry under extreme loads, like typhoons in Japan or in China, as we face in other projects. So it's just back to basics.
Yeah. Do you actually think that all of these things that you have to consider in this climate and all the materials that you need to use if you actually wanted to survive there, if it's still sustainable to build on Antarctica actually?
Yeah, well, that is the why. Why, for damn God, are you invading the Antarctica? Why don't you leave Mother Nature alone there? Well, that's a real question. The only feasible allowable answer is for scientific purpose. Of course, I think nobody would accept the idea that you go to Antarctica to drill a hole to get oil. I mean, you would be killed mathematically. I mean, the South Pole is a treasure for humanity. Yet, we have to be very careful not to be too many there. Huh? And so the being on Antarctica as only one reason is to learn about our planet. This is the only reason. And this is why, so those are research stations. Those are shelters for scientists. We have to not to leave garbage on the site. And by the way, this is another reason why I would not accept to build a building in Antarctica which is not on trestle or post, because you should leave the soil untouched, whether a rock, ice, or whatever, because all the microorganisms you find in there, in the story of the planet Earth, have to be in touch so that you're sure that when you take a sample, you have a valid sample.
Yeah.
It is a. We have to be very modest, shy, and careful by doing that.
Yeah.
So indeed, I'm reading, and I was a couple of last year at a school in London about what's going on in Antarctica with my colleagues from a little bit all over the world. So guys, don't put the building on the ground, put it on posts, because on the ground you're just against the thing you're looking for. And yet, amazingly enough, except the British 1&0 project, all the other buildings are on the ground. And it's very interesting because, you know, there is no point to moralize and say you're better than the other ones. But do you remember when the Americans were dreaming of making a biodome in Antarctica with a inflated ETFE foil like they were doing the American pavilion in Osaka in the 80s?
I believe I read something about it.
Yeah, thanks God they have not done that. Huh? Because that would have been a shame, a very unacceptable colonization of nature.
Yeah, but also it's...
Yet, I was bluffed at the time when I saw that. Huh?
Yeah, well, it looked cool. But yeah, but we're also actually talking to Hugh Broughton. I don't know if you have heard of him. Hugh Broughton is Hugh Broughton. He's like an architectural firm in the UK, and he designed the Haley 6 station, and he's now working on the...
Yeah, Broughton, yeah, of course.
Yeah, those are also on
we were together at the A school last year.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah, well, we're also interviewing him, so...
Of course, we talk to each other. Huh?
Yeah. You have to...
Indeed, you and me were the only one who made a station post.
Oh.
Huh? As far as I know. Huh?
Oh, that's interesting. Do you actually think that's something? I wonder if it's still going to be possible then, with all of the resources that are of the Earth that are sort of running out now, if it's going to be possible to keep building stuff on Antarctica in the future, or will these buildings that you and well, I think maybe you and you both designed very sustainable buildings that will last longer time on Antarctica. But how do you think that it will look in the future when we have to have different technologies maybe and different materials?
Say that again. What is your question exactly?
Now with all of the resources of the Earth and climate change, that we might have to have different technologies and for the built environment, and maybe we can't build anywhere with too much steel or something. Would it still be possible to build on Antarctica, or how would it look? How many things would be possible still?
That is a very, this is the why question. Why should you build in Antarctica? And we already had that issue. Well, the only reason, the only justification of putting something there and being sure researcher would not die in unacceptable circumstances is for scientific research. And after all, when we will know enough, we better get out of Antarctica and dismantle everything and leave all that stuff to nature. Huh? Now, and this is why, but I think this is just by the bare fact, that's how you can build there. Huh? You cannot imagine to pour a concrete wall. And I mean, well, you do have it sometimes, but it doesn't make sense. So you make dismantlable things, and for a certain period of time, and then be sure that you can get back to the normal climate with all your stuff leaving the place intact.
Yeah. How long do you actually think that your building might last on Antarctica? How long do you think how long the Princess Elizabeth station will last? It's now been there 50 years?
Give me your crystal ball. We are now in the process of designing a very large dismantlable building in Antarctica to be permanently inhabited, which creates a new issue is how do you survive in the Antarctica winter? And there is one other interesting reason is the study of the bio and the botanic and the biologic environment. So to bring very questionable bacteria in Antarctica, but people arriving there are arriving with their own bacteria, right? So let's face it, you already have put weird bacteria in Antarctica that were, for which Antarctica was not used. But let's not be too much, moralistic about that. And the issue is, okay, but there are people who are going to live there year long, like some guys are in the space, some guys goes to the moon. It's about the same story. Why? Well, this is our quest for understanding better the planet. And then the idea of making a biodome makes sense. But it is pure exploration. And does it make sense? Who knows?
Yeah. Actually, because people actually do have to live there in the winter, and there's no sun on Antarctica in the winter. Did you also implement something in your design that will help for the mental health of the researchers and people who have to be there?
Absolutely, and I'm not allowed to make it simple to go in more detail about this project. Although a cute Swiss scientific journalist has published, we don't know how, an article in the French magazine Le Monde on the project. But even I will not send it to you. If you want to have it, go to the Monde, because I promised that I wouldn't disclose anything about it. But in the meantime, we are building a theater in Rovaniemi on the polar circle in Finland. And there also, they have a black winter. So the Inuits in northern Finland or northern Norway just live the same way as those researchers. So we learned very amazingly enough a lot with our project in Rovaniemi, seeing those Finnish guys in the black 6 months a year, how they live there. And that's why it's so exciting to have projects a little bit all over the planet. I'm building a little all over the planet, a little bit, but enough to get an idea from a project in tropical China, a project on the polar circle in Rovaniemi. Our project is really on polar circle line, and so it's just it's doable, and people have been since millennia have lived. Eskimos are living out the year in the dark. So see how have they organized their social life to make that enjoyable? And the answer: just go to the Inuits in above the polar circle, and you have the answer. And that's what we are applying on the other side of the planet.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. So have you been there with the Inuits for this project, or have you been to the polar circle over there for this project of the theater there?
Oh, I'm there very often, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
And we just got yesterday the final building documents, so we're going to start. And if you go on our website, you will see it. It's a small theater in Rovaniemi. It's a very exciting project.
Oh, yeah, cool. Okay, so back to the Elizabeth station. So it's a zero carbon station. It's the first zero carbon station of on Earth, I think. No,
Yeah.
on Antarctica. Yeah. So what kind of things did you implement in the design? Like what kind of services needed to be provided, and how is it made zero carbon?
Well, first of all, this part of the design was handled by Alain himself.
Mm-hmm.
He is also a civil engineer and a very knowledgeable civil engineer and interested by energy issue. Of course, we have also our knowledge, and new project we are busy with the energy story. So to make a zero energy building is so mundane. I mean, I know everybody is making a big fuss around that, but that's just basic understanding. And
Okay.
it will be published. I don't know. You can ask Wendy in which book or proceeding it will be published, but it is printout 1409. You know, I have it here. And the title is Reducing the Carbon Footprint at the Princess Elizabeth Station. And the other article is called, where is it? I don't have it here. Minute. Anyway, I made a calculation, a global calculation of the energy needs. Not speaking about the embodied energy, the energy needed to run the building and to maintain the building. Because that is very important. That I can tell you. I mean, because there was already the idea, you know, inventions is a continuous process. So the idea from the guys of Uncarmen of this thing on poles before I came in was a good one for other reasons, which I discovered lately making detailed calculation. The ideal shape for a building to have the minimum amount of energy with the prevailing winds is to make an ellipsoid. This is the best compromise. So our projects, there will be, that is known, will be something that will look like an ellipsoid. So it is next step because the Princess Elizabeth is a little too square, and because of the drag factors, they have influence on the embodied energy of the structure, but also on the consumption. So, and trying to use daylight when you have it, you know, the solar panels makes a lot of sense. It's amazing. If you look at in Brussels, you have about 1,100 kilowatt hours square meter a year, perfectly 37 degrees on south. But you still have 30% of that energy, that means 300 kilowatt hours square meter, vertical on the north face. So with the cost of the photovoltaics now, it makes sense to clad a building in Brussels, the north facade with photovoltaics. So, of course, that being said, and for Rovaniemi, we made also the calculation, and that's amazing because Finland has nuclear power, and because they have nuclear power, they don't need photovoltaics. And by the way the Chinese and the Indians are developing safe nuclear energy makes that it makes sense. And of course, there's a big argument about, you know, nuclear energy is a very new technology. It has not 70 years of age. So it is normal you have accidents. When we were building the first ships that were going to South America, starting from Spain, they lost a lot of ships, a lot of deaths. And so if we modestly accept that scientific development have unfortunately always casualties. Same with airplanes, and the amount of airplanes that crashed. It is not that reason that we have stopped to make airplanes. Well, there is this kind of fear about nuclear energy for the moment, which is not healthy. The issue is how to get nuclear power safely and sustainably. And this is the way, and the Chinese have taken the lead for the moment, and it's a pity that Europe and the States are so backwards, and the decision of the European Commission on that are not a wise decision. They are, beliefs. So, but probably the most logical thing would be to go with a small, new generation nuclear reactor. That is zero energy. But this is, saying that I'm excommunicated automatically. So it is not in the mood, in the taste of the day.
Yeah.
So, but that's amazing, because probably the most obvious thing would be to put a very small Chinese nuclear reactor there, with all the safe conditions that would make it, of course, zero energy, and much more. Anyway, that's an issue. See about the why, and you have, and it's an open discussion. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just questioning it. Maybe we could, in the meantime, what are we playing with? Photovoltaics, windmills, and hydrogen to store the energy when it is produced and you don't use it. It's a fantastically moving item. To go back to windmills, for example, you might know or know, but we have invented a guide to windmill mast, which costs 20% less than any other windmill mast. We had developed that on behalf of the Groupe Suez in Paris. We have all the patents, international patents, proven from the Gabanish alloy, that you can imagine that the engineering stamps you need before building a windmill mast are enormous. But we have been shooted by the Danish windmill industry, who didn't saw with pleasure our windmill. So, although we have proven it is more economical, less harmful for the environment, dismantleable, that we can reuse all the old windmills with their masts wear out by fatigue. No one of my windmill masts have ever been built. So Alain decided to build 2 of those, the South Pole.
Oh.
You see, that's the magnificent story about engineering. And if you look at the history of engineering, and in the story of plastics, for example, the time lag between a bright scientist discovering a new plastic and this plastic being usefully used. I speak about bioplastics, for example, which are known since decades. Why damn God are they not used? Well, because there is an inertia of the industry, a fear about employment. The fear about unemployment is probably one of the, amazingly, and because history has proven that it is stupid, the more you tackle energy at the condition, it is good for human being and nature, fundamental, is always positive. So anyway, those things takes time, and 25 years is peanuts. So we and also, for example, a bright inventor at University of New South Wales in Sydney invented vacuum glass about 20 years ago. It is a bright invention. You replace a 7 centimeter thick triple glazing which is full of silicone and aluminum by a glass which is 8 millimeter thick with vacuum between. When I heard about it about 20 years ago, no, maybe not, about that, Nippon Sheet Glass in Tokyo had bought the patent from this crazy teacher in Sydney. And they have produced the Spacia, the vacuum glass. Now it's taken over by Pilkington. So I immediately asked the guys from Tokyo to send me a sample. And this historical sample is now stored at the Belgian Royal Archives. And with that sample, I went to see the boss of AGC. And the guy just fell out laughing from his chair. This is really Samyn. You're crazy. Nobody will ever do that. So I was very angry. I left his office smashing the door, say, you're really a stupid big boss. And in the meantime, we won the competition for the new headquarters. with a new big boss. And the first meeting, I told you, I'm not sure I'm going to make your building, except if you think about vacuum glass. And then the new boss told me, I was in the office when you had this argument 6 years ago. Of course, we're going to develop vacuum glass. And now, thanks to a young, bright engineer in Tokyo, ETC is producing vacuum glass without a small inlet to suck the air. It's a ceramic edge. You want to see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, wait a minute. I have the other historical sample. The first produced at AGC in the world. I take it. I'm coming back. One moment.
Yeah.
That's it.
Cool.
And this has a U value of 0.7 watts meter degree K. So the same as such a glass. And this one is 27 October 2017. And this one is
I think a little bit more. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Where is it? How do you see it? I mean, where is this camera? Okay, here it is.
Yeah.
Voila, there. And well, in the meantime, I remember a couple of years ago, still the big boss at ADG was telling me in the corridor, okay, we're developing this vacuum glass, but there's no market for that. It's amazing, eh? So in the meantime, they have built the first production line 2 years ago, and it's such a success that now they're building the third line. The problem is that it still costs 400 euro a square meter compared to 40 euro for double glazing. But that has to do with something about science, with white rooms. Because to produce that vacuum glass, you can imagine that dust is an enemy. So you have obviously to work in the white rooms. And if you see the amount of components good for the environment, this is a good example, which need to be produced in white rooms. The image of a factory full of dust and smoke is gone. The more and more factories will be white rooms. That means that a factory may be in your house and that you don't need industrial zonings anymore. You see the thing. And about COVID, you have to work home now. So all this is mixed. And when you think about Antarctica, of course, we will use this vacuum glass there for the new building. Because the cost of transport becomes important. The CO2 print of transporting this glass is not a peanut, you see. We are living very exciting moments, where suddenly people may imagine that an engineer might be also someone thinking about nature, biology, and botanics, which I'm of course clearly in that vein.
Yeah, nice. Well, I think by now we have arrived at the final part of the interview. So we have this question that we ask at the end of every podcast, and that is, what do you think is the most important thing the students of today should know about the topics that we just discussed? And are there any other topics that you think we should gain more knowledge about?
You speak about architecture students?
Yeah, architecture, but also engineers in the.
Okay, let's separate the two, although the links are obvious. For the architecture students, the first fundamental thing is that they get rid of images. They concentrate on knowledge, tools, get the freedom of thoughts. Nothing is worse than looking at magazines. Look at nature, look at tools, look at human being, look at your maths, your chemistry, your physics. Look at philosophers. Back to basics. just learn the fundamentals before getting distracted by images. This is fundamental. And to start with, there is a very famous Dutch guy, is Hans Dom van der Laan. You heard about? Huh? No? Hans Dom van der Laan. He has written het plastische getal, il nombre plastico, le nombre plastique in French, and it is, you know about Le Corbusier.
Yeah, of course.
This is useless because all the theory of Corbusier is just nonsense. But he was a guy quite talented using TV. So he has make a huge propaganda with very wrong concepts and ideas. His modular is something perfect for a two-dimensional space, but architects are busy with three-dimensional space. And Van der Laan, at the same time, Le Corbusier was making such a noise that he was not audible in Vals, in the Abdij of Vals, who he designed, wrote that fundamental book, which goes back to Vitruvius. And it is a proven theory. And it's a shame that people are speaking about Le Modulor in architecture school without speaking of Van der Laan, because the Corbusier theory has never been demonstrated, nor by him, nor by anyone. But Van der Laan has demonstrated that the ruling equation for space is VQ equals phi plus 1, and not V square equals phi plus 4. Just think about those basic things, because when you design, and when you do that, you make harmonious space. And when you use the golden ratio, you make neurotic space, because we are not living in 2 dimensions, we're living in 3 dimensions. And I have been cheated by that during years, By chance, I heard about Van der Laan, and by chance, I could revise my position. And the most funny thing is, while doing inexpensive building, I was using the Pythagoras triangle, which, by the way, is not invented by Pythagoras, but by Chinese 2 millennia before, 3, 4, 5. And that is the consequence of Van der Laan. And it is so obvious to use. So, to cite one example. The other one is that an architect should not be afraid of making calculations, basic calculation. How bright and friendly an engineer might be, he is not in the head of the architect. And the engineer is based with R&D. The architect is based with D&I. It is the duty of the architect to discover and invent. The engineer might also do it, of course, but in a project, the orchestra chef, the composer, is the architect. So he needs to have the knowledge to give instruction to the first violin or the first piano. If he is not able, the chef will be the piano player or the violin player. And exactly what you see now, projects are architects, and this competition system favors this lack of thinking, because juries are looking at image. They don't have time to look at fundamentals. And so, of course, you better, if you want to survive, you better make a fancy image, whatever the logic behind it, you see. But that has polluted the built environment. So this exercise to be able to seduce, still being wise, which is not obvious, you see. So I give you an example. This morning, we have guys from a little all over the planet here, and young ladies. And what is amazing is the difficulty for a young architect mastering Revit, 3D modeling, BIM perfectly, to put quotation correctly on a drawing. Because of course this is a 3D model, but finally on site, except if you work with robots, you have a craftsman who needs a drawing with dimensions. And the way the dimensions are laid are fundamentals, because you can put quotation in a very, very bad way on a drawing that can lead to major mistake, if not accidents. You see? So it is back to basics. And I think the COVID story remembers that we, don't bluff. You can bluff for a small period, but the truth will always come back and knock you down. So make simple things, but be sure when you are designing, dreaming, and please, young architects, young engineers, dream, make mistakes. be sure you're making a mistake, because that mistake probably some right stuff will come out of it. But the worst thing to do is copy. The worst thing is to be impressed by something which someone else has done. Not saying you cannot admire a piece of art, of course. Admiring, you could. I was telling myself my admiration for Richard Rogers' work, for example. But that's not why I don't copy Richard Rogers. He gave me courage. You see, if he can do it, why shouldn't I try to do it also? You see?
Yeah, that's a very good way to look at it.
And the same for engineers, because they are martyrized with too complicated the mathematics they have to master anyway, but that creates a veil of obscurity towards nature. And for example, computer science, and now I see a lot of new young teachers in computer science who are going back to, do you tackle humanity with a computer? And it is possible, as long as you think about it. Think about the RFID, radio frequency identifier. You know, there is no reason for a banker to make a safe if the money can be stolen with a computer. And maybe you don't know, but maybe some indelicate doctor has put under your skin a small RFID of 150 micron size, and that you are tracked in your daily life. So there are so many ethical issues related to engineering, and architects should be aware of it. I'll give you an example. It was very funny. We were invited to make a competition for a major bank. And I already have curious experience. I said, okay, I'll try again. And we ended up finalists with another international firm of architects. And we were in the beginning 20, but we finally were 2. And I proposed the bank a glass building with atrias and shops and kribbe, societal functions. And the other one made a safe in concrete, beautiful object. And the young bankers were saying, oh, we should stop making bunkers. And I have no acrimony at all. It has been a very interesting exercise. They have been very, very respectful and correct. But finally, they choose for the safe. The image of the bank, we should have something solid to protect that money, although it's an illusion, you see. And it's also important for an architect, a student, to accept the idea that there is nothing perfect. That's always a matter of compromise, and it is the beauty of the compromise which is important. I give you another example. Why for them do we have cathedrals? It is not reasonable to have a cathedral, right? It costs us a fortune, a lot of lives to build that. But how beautiful those objects are. The fire of Notre-Dame de Paris has been a drama. And then think, just to take another French example, the new National Library of Dominique Perrault, with the 4 books. More unreasonable than that you cannot imagine, because of course if you want to protect books, you put them in a black space with a lot of thermal inertia, and not in a thin tower which you have to put air conditioning in it. But yet Mitterrand, it's room to be right to choose this unreasonable project, because the symbolic value of this National Library is much more important than the additional energy you have to spend for that building compared to a more wise National Library. See, and if I look at my modest project, it's amazing to see which one pleases people, and it is not necessarily the most wise, but the most poetic maybe.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, then it's been really a pleasure talking to you. I think we've arrived at the end.
I was just wondering, because I saw this documentary a while ago that was like a lot of ice melting in Antarctica, and I was wondering, like very quickly, like a large part of Antarctica. I'm not sure by your part, because I didn't really do the research, so I'm not sure if it's relevant. But I was wondering if that affects your design process, because of the climate change that is like a large part of Antarctica is melting very quickly.
Of course, again, we know very little about all that, but just a normal scientist should only say, well, if there is a doubt, we just take care of that doubt. It is too serious. Even if it would not be true, this is a secondary issue. So it's the principle of security. And this is well underway. We have to tackle that issue of warming and CO2 quite seriously. I give you another example which hurts me a lot. Can you imagine the money humanity is putting in warships, in guns? Imagine now that suddenly the American Navy, instead of fighting people with their boats, were just used to clean those plastic oceans. And that would be, for example, for an American president in the program, say to the humanity, with our warships, we're not going war, we will clean the ocean, because after all, to take those plastic ocean for the American army would just be a joke, a nice exercise, wouldn't it be? So maybe the enemy for a big army is not human being, but themselves and the planet. Maybe the enemy is the plastic, not Al-Qaeda, to say something I mean, a little provoking. See, so we have, of course, and it's a happening. It's not a drama. Let's enjoy that. You see, have you seen on TV what's happening in South France? In southern France, there have been dramatic rainfalls and inundation. And of course, the naive people who have built a nice pavilion of their dream, far from the old village, which is still there since centuries, if not millennia, have been washed out. And everybody knew that one day they're going to be washed out. But you have that. And so there are enough warnings that it happens and it will happen. Why should we do so crazy stuff? Yet, we still have business center with crazy skyscrapers with air conditioning and silicone glued reflecting glass. And then, to make it nice, some crazy guys make twisted towers. Who cares for twisted towers?
Yeah, I was just because I just saw the documentary and I was wondering, yeah.
Indeed. But you see, just to finish, to see how ambiguous our lives and the world is. When the Impressionists, Monet, Manet, Degas, Pissarro, were proposing the Impressionist movement in painting at the end of the 19th century, they were snubbed by the Parisian intellectuals. And the gallery, Bertrand Ruel, was nearly bankrupt because he believed in them and he bought all the paintings from Monet in particular. And nearly bankrupt, he had an idea. He took all the paintings, put them in a boat, and went to New York. And there, the ladies of those brutal industrialists making a fortune by killing Indians, by having black slaves in America. Imagine that, with the money of slavery, of killing Indians, they have saved the Impressionists, because the wives of those crazy, brutal entrepreneurs were quite enough, and they were cultivated. And now, so America, democracy, but they were killing a lot of people. Now you go to China with Eidhoven. It is not good, of course, what's happening with Eidhoven, but compare with what was happening in the United States, a so-called democracy, under 40 years ago. See, and now what I discover is that my crazy idea about vertical villages, maybe you've seen the product I'm making for Positech and Socho. I'm telling that, the first time coming back from MIT, imagine that, girls, in 1973, at the very handsome Royal Institute of Civil Engineers and Engineers in Belgium, in this beautiful palace, young guy, I was explaining to my old colleagues that we should make vertical villages that make sense for urban planning. And they were just the nice young poet, young guy. Thank you very much for your lecture. Huh? But since years, I still making some serious theoretical work about that. You can go on the website, read the vertical city I wrote, and the arguments I'm developing. It's only partial arguments. There is no truth in that, but at least it's to open the question. Huh? And my first drawing a vertical porous building, to make a high-rise building, make it fat and hollow. You will and be sure that you have walks so that you can go with a horse on the top of your tower and stop, and having some straw to get to your house, like the villages in Cinque Terre in Italy. So nothing new. But I had to wait 50 years before finding a client that thought, that's what we should do. And it's in China. So 50 years ago, of course, the young engineer, my dream was to go to MIT, so I went to MIT. But now I would advise a young engineer to go to Beijing, to Shanghai, because that's where it happens now, not anymore. It's crazy, yeah? And the problem is that Chinese is quite a difficult language to learn. And Wordish, which we're using together now, is quite easy. It's not a language, it's blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, I think that concludes it.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was very interesting to listen to.
Yeah,
I really
enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, I really enjoyed listening to it.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Philippe Samyn, for recording this podcast with us. And to the audience, thank you for listening. The next podcast will be uploaded on Monday, December 7th. We will be talking to Paul Chen on the subject of building methods and technology of the future and the influence of AI on our environment. All of our podcasts are available on our channel, on Spotify, YouTube and SoundCloud.